Hey guys, I'm making a new tier list. Hopefully, people won't get mad at me for this one because this tier list I think looks a lot different from what normally people would put out. But obviously, right, everybody's tier list is going to be different, right? Not everybody's going to have the same opinion on everything, and if you disagree with me, that's fine. I'm just going to say why I think everybody is where they are. I have 5,000 hours and above in this game. I played for a very long time and I think I have a good opinion on every single one. Um, just know if, it might be kind of crazy, right? Where I might be putting some of them, you're going to see maybe some strong killers lower than where they normally would be from content creators, and then you're going to see really weak killers pretty high, and I'm going to explain why I think that actually is. I'm not looking at just my personal experience playing the killer because I am stronger with certain ones than others, but I'm also looking at what I've seen other people do with the killers. I've seen clips, I've seen everything. So like if you're like, "Oh, have you watched this guy do this crazy thing?" I've seen it all. So this is also from in-game stuff, and I'm looking at this as the perspective of you going against strong Swifts who have comms, but also maybe a little bit of solo queue in there. But for the most part, I'm looking at them bringing pretty good add-ons. Um, for most of the time, like there's not really too many restrictions. It's the max potential they can be against the max potential, right? So, um, 90% of the time, what it comes down to, a killer being strong or weak, is actually what map they happen to be on. I think the map actually determines usually the outcome of the match. Perks, the skill, and who you're playing come second. But if we're looking at what killers do well, 90% of the time, it's actually what killers had the most good maps for them. That usually leads to the outcome of the match. Um, Obviously, there's some really obvious strong killers that I don't think need to take too much discussion out of, but some I think are a bit hot takes and I do have to discuss. So I'm going to start with the weakest killer and just work my way up to S tier. So we're going to start with the very bottom. I don't think it needs too much explanation. Skull Merchant got gutted. She's very weak. She's basically an M1 killer without a power. Her drones requires 3 stacks, requires you to run and not be stationary or actionary, and it rarely comes into handy. The best thing she has is stealth, which you can get through a perk, and it's for less time than a perk. So, yeah, she's not very good. Um, Arguably, she could be better than some D tier killers just because she is an M1 without any sort of downside, but her downside is just having nothing, right? So, I would have to say she's the worst in the game. Um, the second lowest might be a shock, which is Hag. I have played Hag for a while. Hag has the same problem that Trapper has, just a bit worse. She doesn't have good add-ons anymore. Her range add-ons got nerfed. The best thing she has is to change up her playstyle, which isn't necessarily a buff, but a change. And as well as her map pressure is determining based off what the team gives you. If it's a team that crouches around the map, you are literally a killer without a power. So yeah, she's not very good. In solo queue, she stomps, but even then, it's right, like you're going against good solo queue teammates, it won't even matter because it does give off a remnant. We're looking at this from the smartest perspective, and Hag only excels from mistakes. And she's a 4.4 killer who can't do anything in chased otherwise. So, yeah, second worst, I think, doesn't need too much explanation. And then we have Trapper, who is arguably the weakest in the entire game. However, I will say that his add-ons are actually pretty decent, um, even though it also excels from mistakes made rather than you having the ability to do it yourself, which is what he suffers from. He's a trapper, right? He waits for them to come to him, which is only from the mistakes made. And Trapper, unfortunately, doesn't have a good base kit, but his add-ons are actually quite decent. However, if you're not really trapping in the basement, he's still not the greatest killer. He lacks mobility, he lacks really a lot of good things, but unlike Hag, he has 4.6. That's why he's above Hag, and also his add-ons are a lot better, but he is unfortunately still a D tier killer. And then we have top of D tier, which is Pig. She does have some anti-loop, but it's so niche that it rarely comes into play. The ability to put traps on survivors as a form of slowdown, it's kind of just a weaker Onryu situation. Um, Pig can sometimes have stealth, but you have to force a 4.4 mobility, and you can't M1, which can hurt you. So Pig unfortunately doesn't have map presence, map control. She lacks a lot of things, but just like Trapper, she has very good add-ons, and that's really the only reason she's decent is her add-ons are actually some of the best for her traps, but it's so hard to get traps to work nowadays. In fact, old Pig, I would have said, was arguably better. So current Pig is just not great. And then we have Myers, who was previously in D tier. I think he is a lot better. He, however, isn't way better like people will say because stuff like Tombstone is weaker. Things like Infinite Tier 3 are weaker. They can come into play and they can kill you, but at that point, it's already something you could punish somebody who's already doing bad, so any killer can really help in that situation. But the ability to tear up from long range doesn't really buff him, it just changes him, right? So he's not entirely stronger, he's just slightly better because what he had before was ass and now he's actually decent. So Myers is unfortunately still a low tier killer. He has his movement speed, which is not too bad to catch people at loops. He's better than maybe the average M1, but that's kind of all he does. If teams stay injured, he kind of doesn't do anything. So to be fair, Myers is not too bad, but like he's still definitely in that C tier range. And then we have Ghostface. So Ghostface is probably forever going to be better than Myers just because stocking individual people and 90-90 in each individual person is better than tearing up all at once. You could arguably say that Myers has movement speed to catch up, but you can get that through add-ons on Ghostface. So in that way, Ghostface I actually think is slightly better still. And Ghostface's stealth, he doesn't have a downside at the start. He's not as map dependent as Myers. Uh, so in that case, I think Ghostface is slightly better, but just like Myers, he lacks any form of map presence, mobility, stuff like that. Pretty much anybody who's in C tier, by the way, is going to have pretty much no mobility, so every single one will be down there. And then we have Legion. Legion got buffed. However, I think he's still in the same spot because I just don't think he passes Trickster still. Legion basically has faster canceling. You can actually down with your power now effectively and kind of use it as an anti-loop, but I don't think it really changes the fundamentals of Legion. He still suffers from map size. He doesn't have too much map mobility. He has slightly better map mobility now because of the cooldown reduction, but it's still not great. His add-on selection is okay. Pretty much the best thing that comes out of him is it's basically a permanent NOED that you have to reset. So it's not horrible, but right, he's never going to be like a B tier killer, fortunately. And then we have Trickster. Trickster is a very mixed one in current Trickster. I think if you're going against a good Trickster, it's a matter of time when you go down, but it takes just so long to get the down. But it doesn't really matter, right? If you get the down, because at that point, it just took you way too long. So when people are saying, oh, you can get down to Trickster, there's no counterplay, you're right, but when there is no counterplay, but it takes a long time, it's equals to something bad because you're not getting pressure fast enough. The only time he excels is if people are dumb, group up, and then you get downs quick when they're in the open, but that's such a rare case. Smart people will dart to a safe position, high walls kill him, and map dependency is a big part in his power. Him being 4.6 definitely pushed him up, though, but he's still not great, unfortunately. Doctor has a very interesting case because Doctor has actually quite decent anti-loop, but he doesn't have really good anything else. He doesn't have any sort of mobility. His ability to reveal people is very lackluster once you understand the idea of just knowing where everybody is. It's just something you'll form over time. You can kind of just know where people are rather than having to find people. It can help you in some situations, but just it's only going to help new people. Doctor's a great character for new players for that reason, but his anti-loop is actually quite disgusting in some maps, but unfortunately he's quite map dependent for that reason. He sucks on big maps. But he's not horrible, like he's not going to be a D tier, but he's not going to be a B tier either because he just lacks the basic fundamentals. Chucky. Chucky fell off. Chucky fell off so much, and I don't know why they nerfed him to the degree they did. Does it make him D tier? No, because he can still hit over pallets and he can still have stealth and height, and that's still good. but he's a 4.4 killer with no mobility at all. And if you don't realize how bad that is for somebody like him, being able to get across a big map like Larry's Memorial, or, like if you're going to go on any just big map, right? Whether it's indoor, outdoor, and Larry's where, yeah, you can chain windows, but you won't be able to hit people over them ever because you can't turn when you're scampering. It's just so bad. Chucky's unfortunately just not a great killer. The best thing he has is his height and his dash in some situations. Pretty much good in any situation a pig dash would be in, just slightly better. Um, but yeah, his stealth and height is really the only thing going for him, and that's only really going to catch new players off rather than smart players. So I feel like he's not great. Demogorgon. Demogorgon's a weird placement too, because Demogorgon, I think on paper, is very similar to Huntress. However, the difference between Huntress and Demo is Huntress has slower wind up, but you don't have the limited reach. She is 4.4 and he's 4.6, and you could say that that's better, but unfortunately, every add-on Demogorgon has is just so bad, and every add-on he can possibly use, he can't use because some add-ons are just straight up required on him to be decent. His mobility is arguably worse than Hag's, uh, because it's kind of like the opposite of Hag, where the only time you're going to get value is when they're not at your traps. So in that case, using the mobility is pointless because if they are there, right, the portal's gone, and if they aren't there, you're wasting your time teleporting there. His shred is the best thing going for him, but even then, it's just like, it's okay. It's not quite as good, but it's very similar to like a Chucky dash, where like you won't have mobility to an extent, but you're gonna have some sort of interloop. That's pretty much Demogorgon. And then we have Xeno, who unfortunately kind of lands in the same spot as Demo, has the exact same problem, but it's the total opposite. It's not that your portals get removed, it's that your power gets removed constantly if they're smart. Putting down turret counterplay, there's not too much you can do in terms of double pallets, and when you do break it, it gives them free distance. And you just don't use your mobility a lot. It's a very, very bad mobility tool, unfortunately. Like Xeno has like one of the worst teleport abilities in the entire game. Uh, the only thing saving Xeno, in my opinion, is his add-ons are actually quite decent, and his anti-loop is actually pretty good when you have it, right? So that's why he's the top of C tier, but he's not B tier, not even close, unfortunately. Um, then we have Deathslinger. Deathslinger is a very decent chase killer. He ends chases very fast, but he suffers from one problem, Swift, body blocking, and that just really kills him, unfortunately, and Kaneki just does everything he does, but a trillion times better. So, unfortunately, he's bad for that reason. Big maps suck for him because he's 4.4, and Deathslinger is just not the greatest killer, right? He's all right. He's decent. He has very fast downs, basically. Um, and then we have Cenobite. Cenobite is one that I've had a lot of people uh, kind of like mixed on me about for this placement, and so I want to explain this one a little bit more in depth. So Cenobite has one problem, which is the harassment of the box. Now, he can interrupt boxes with this chain, he can interrupt them, go up to them, and keep chain hunt constantly going. The problem is you have no control over who is taking that box. And if they know who to, like, if they spread evenly and each individual person just goes for the boxes X amount of times, you could end up just not getting a kill because you've hooked everybody individually because you're trying to keep chain hunt. Now, chain hunt is decent, but it's not great. Chain hunt you can still dodge. It's not keeping them from going down. It just keeps them doing gens slower, basically. And resetting becomes impossible, which is still good. Don't get me wrong. His anti-loop is decent, but it's not great. His add-ons are decent, but they're not great. And Cenobite, unfortunately, just lacks some of the fundamentals you just need to go into B tier, which is the unreliability of the box. The box, if you don't have Chain Hunt, you just become a weaker clown. If you do have Chain Hunt, you're a stronger clown, right? But that just becomes unreliable because you can't guarantee that. And if you don't have a good early game with the box, the rest of the game kind of just becomes a suffering match. If you're lucky against a good team, you'll get maybe one period of chain hunt. Most of the time, you're just never going to have chain hunt because you're just too busy chasing somebody else and they'll just sell the box. And you'll get the down, but you'll have no pressure because the chase wasn't quick enough. So Cenobite, I think is B minus, bottom of B minus. You could arguably say C, but I do think his add-ons are quite decent still. So he can use like Iridescent Fang and still have some decent value. And we're looking at it with the max potential. So I think he's still very good. And then we have Dredge. Dredge is slept on a little bit, but not entirely. His mobility is actually quite decent. It's like a better Xeno teleport per se, but it's still map dependent. He's still a map dependent killer. Nightfall is actually a pretty strong tool. It's kind of like Chain Hunt with Cenobite, but you don't have to do anything to get it. It just takes time, but sometimes time can be bad because time might not be on your side, right? But you're going to at least get it. You're not guaranteed to get Chain Hunt with Cenobite. So for that reason, Dredge is better. And his Antiloop, I would say, is slightly better than Cenobites. But unfortunately, they still both kind of suffer from the same problem, which is just lacking just pressure in general, just the fundamental pressure that you have with most killers. It's just every killer above them is better. Unfortunately, both their add-ons are kind of just meh. And then Cannibal. Cannibal is a very simple killer, but he gets the job done. But as soon as you go against a good team, it can be kind of difficult without Bamboozle. He's kind of like a killer who has to bring 3 perks instead of 4, because 90% of the time, Windows just kill him. That's pretty much the only reason why he's down here. He would be B+, unless Windows didn't kill him. I don't think Bubba needs too much explanation. He's a snowball king, but just like Huntress, he excels from mistakes made rather than him getting a bunch of people. That rarely happens, but he can get downs fast and pallets out of the way quick, so he's still decent. Huntress is B minus just because she's 4.4. Reloading takes a long time, and she has no map mobility. But her hatchets are still decent. You can still hit over pallets. You can still hit cross maps, and you can snowball hard, but you only excel from mistakes as well. So just like Bubba kind of has the same problem, which is you have to bring aura reading instead of slowdown to really excel at your power, kind of like how Bubba needs to take Bamboozle to really excel at his power. So unfortunately, Huntress is down there, but she is a snowball god, so she is still really decent. She's pretty much in every way the better hag, pretty much. And then we have Wesker. Now, Wesker, I think, is a mixed bag too. I don't think people realize how much the hindrance nerf actually hurt him. His hindrance slowdown was actually quite strong and a big part of him. He kind of has the same problem that some mobility killers like Chucky have, where they don't have a lot of mobility, but they can still get around the map. Wesker, unfortunately, doesn't really have too much mobility. He mostly just has pretty strong Antiloop. His Antiloop is decent, but it's not super strong. I feel like the ability to save time on the pickup, though, is quite nice. And I would say his add-ons are actually quite decent. So Wesker, I think B minus is fair. Freddy. Freddy's also a weird case because Freddy actually has one of the better mobility tools in the game, and his Antiloop and Dream Pallets are quite strong, right? If you actually look at it, the ability to make survivors oblivious is actually quite a strong tool. Not necessarily in Swift, but definitely in solo queue. And his add-ons are very strong. But Freddy has one massive problem that just keeps him from being strong, which is just the immunity time. Immunity time really just makes or breaks Freddy. If you go against a team who's constantly taking clocks and immunity, you have no power but a teleport, right? Because every dream snare you send won't do anything. Every dream pallet you hit him with won't do anything. And in fact, you're just wasting time even trying to go for it. And at that point, you're just a 4.6 killer with a good mobility tool. He's not bad, but 90% of the time, that's how matches go with Freddy. It's just where you just can't use your power. It takes too long down because you have to wait for the immunity time to come up to get Antiloop, and then you can't commit, and then they just go reset and use the clock again. I will say the ability not to heal in the dream world really doesn't do too much for him. And he has strong add-ons, but you have to bring Nancy's sketch 90% of the time for him to be decent. So his good kit barely matters. But he's still decent. He's kind of like when he has them asleep, he's a stronger clown, but when they aren't asleep, he's in every way a weaker clown, right? So to me, he's still decent, but he's not going to be B plus because it's just super unreliable. Then we have Onryu. Onryu has one of, if not the best, mobility tool in the entire game, kind of like Freddy. Um, she's a little bit better than Freddy because the Condemn slowdown is a very strong tool. She, however, has one problem. It's just the fact she unfortunately just has nothing to do in chase. It's kind of like she has to actually 50-50 my game, and then she has her phase, which can help, but right, if you're going against a smart player, it still won't really matter. So, unfortunately, Onryu is a very great slowdown killer, but that slowdown only gets you so far against a strong team. So I think top of B minus is fair for Onryu. Clown. Clown is the bottom of B plus, and a lot of people think Clown is very weak. I would actually say Clown is pretty solid. He, however, does reasons they think he's bad are still true. He lacks any form of teleportation. He lacks any form of slowdown, right, in terms of the pressure. But his anti-loop is very, very strong. He arguably has the best anti-loop in the game, but that's all he has, right? He's better than Huntress because you don't have to waste time reloading at a locker, and you could just reload anywhere, and that's a lot better. His add-ons are quite decent, and he's a 4.6 killer still, and most of the killers before him aren't always that way. Uh, but yeah, I would say Clown's very solid still. Clown is a very decent killer. He has some very strong slowdown potential in chase. And his haste bottles can actually help him for map traversal too. So even though he's not entirely amazing at traversal, he can still use that. Then we have Nemesis above Clown, who arguably has an even better anti-loop than Clown. Nemesis, I think a lot of people will say, why is Nemesis above Wesker? Is because I would fear a Nemesis I'm way more scared of a Nemesis than a Wesker. A good Nemesis is actually terrifying if you've ever gone against a good Nemesis. Uh, the palette break is kind of like Bubba on steroids. Uh, his ability to, yeah, condemn you, or not condemn you, sorry, infect you, and then you don't get the hit, sure, but they become hindered and you get the second hit right away. Uh, but the downs become instant. As soon as you're tier 2 and tier 3, the downs are usually unavoidable to a good Nemesis. I, unfortunately, am not a good Nemesis player. I suck. But from what I've seen, yeah, Nemesis is easily, I think, at least bottom of B+. Of course, the only real problem holding back is the add-ons. If his add-ons were better, I could arguably see him being A tier. So he's very good, but unfortunately his add-ons are just not great. Then we have Oni. Now, this might come to a bit of a shock. I think a lot of people will say Oni is very strong. However, Oni suffers from one problem. One problem, which is unfortunately a big problem. Early game and pre-dropping really just kills the character. Unfortunately, he is very good, but unfortunately at the start of the game, it's kind of like Myers with the same problem where the early game is very weak for him, but when you get it, it's very strong. Kind of look at him like Devour Hope in a way. He's basically Devour Hope as a killer. It's a gamble. You're either going to do really well or really bad at the start of the game. I've gone against really good Oni players who just didn't even get one hit and lost the entire game, but I've also seen like really good Oni players get hits right away and then end the game in seconds. So it's really a 50-50. You're either going to go into a match where he has a horrible early game, and that's really all that matters in DBD is the early game. If the early game is bad, the rest of the game is pretty much determined unless they mess up. And in this case, I'm picturing it as if survivors never mess up, right? So Oni, unfortunately, is not A tier, but he's still good because you can still down. He's pretty much like a weaker Billy. Uh, but he is very, very, very strong when he actually gets Demon Fury. It's just unfortunately you can't guarantee that he will in the time periods he needs it. So even though he's a snowball god, he only excels from mistakes made again, kind of like Huntress. Then we have Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head doesn't have mobility, but his anti-loop is so strong. It's so good. Unfortunately, on some maps, it can be a bit weak because of the elevation, and his add-ons are quite weak, but his ability to down is kind of like Nemesis. and also to avoid meta perks by hooking players is very strong, and saving the time to hook is a thing that people kind of sleep on. So Pyramid Head, very good. Also, Killer I'm not very good with, but it would be a crime to put him any lower. So I think he's very decent. Then we have Unknown. I know Otstarva is a little bit Unknown bias. He does like Unknown a lot, right? But but I would say Unknown is about the same tier as Pyramid Head, which I think is fine. They pretty much do the same thing. It's just Unknown needs to take 3 hits instead of an immediate injure. But unlike Pyramid Head, you have mobility. And kind of like Demo, that mobility can be removed, but it's so fast. You're just there, right? Whenever you want to be, which is very strong. So, and his add-ons are also quite decent. Um, and his skill ceiling is really high. Unfortunately, Unknown is just not the fastest person when it comes to downing. So Unknown can take a minute to actually down, kind of like Artist, which is why I think they're very close. But I think that Unknown has definitely the pressure over Pyramid Head for sure. I think in most cases. And then we have Plague. Plague Plague has very, very, very strong add-ons, a very good base kit as well. However, Plague kind of has the same problem that Oni has, where if you don't cleanse, and you're going to get smart people who don't cleanse, you only have one Corrupt Purge without add-ons. Obviously, we're looking at it in cases that you can bring anything, right? But even then, it decreases the Corrupt Purge time. And if you have people who are patient at pallets, it can be a bit tough for the down. She's a very strong killer, and people sleep on her. But as soon as you go against a team who knows what they're doing against Plague, you don't have mobility, right? And that can definitely hurt you for sure. I do think she's better than Oni because her add-ons are a lot better, but I think that she can still struggle against good teams. So unfortunately, she doesn't quite hit the A tier mark. Artist barely doesn't make it an A tier. Her crows in some situations are completely uncounterable, but her map presence, even though it's everywhere and she can hit pretty much anywhere, um, right, she has no counterplay really on loops. Like pretty much there's nothing you can do and it's holding W. It's not that there is like she kind of has like the same thing as Trickster. It's like Trickster to a better level, right? It's basically Trickster but strong. She doesn't have good add-ons. She doesn't have mobility, but just be able to kick people off gens, use builds related to that for that reason. Um, Lockers do kill her a little bit. Big maps aren't a struggle for her as much, and even though snipes are fun, they're not the thing to go for. Her face-to-face downs are so fast. There's pretty much nothing SRR can do at any palette if the artist is good. If they know what they're doing, there's pretty much no counterplay at all. It's just if you guess correctly, that's going to make her really strong. Unfortunately, the thing holding her back is add-ons and lockers that just are her entire counterplay. So unfortunately, she doesn't hit the A mark for that reason, but she's very, very close to. And then we have Wraith. Wraith is a killer who's slept on for sure. Very strong add-ons, very decent anti-loop, but his map presence is so strong, and I don't think people realize how strong that is. His stealth is quite decent, arguably the best stealth killer in the game since Springtrap. I will say that his ability to snowball is not the greatest, right? But he is a killer who can use every perk in the game, effectively, pretty much. And he is very unpredictable with his builds. A lot of people don't realize how strong that is. When Myers had like Tombstone, that was really his saving grace. With Wraith, it's that, but to a better degree. You can run so many add-ons that just change the match entirely and how to play against Wraith, right? You can run add-ons that rely on the timing of reaction time at loops, mobility, pallet break speed, volt speed, right? And those can make Wraith very scary. So, in my opinion, Wraith is definitely a slept-on killer. He unfortunately doesn't have any sort of slowdown tool. He's kind of like a reverse Clown. Instead of slowing them down, you speed up, so it's very similar to Clown. But his ability to just get everywhere is so good. So the only thing holding him back is just no M2, and his chases can sometimes be long if played wrong. So unfortunately, not top of A tier, but definitely has, I would say, the best set of add-ons in the entire game. And then we have Dracula, who is kind of like a slightly better Wraith. Um, he has the map presence that Wraith has. He has, I would say, better anti-loop than Wraith, which is why he's higher. His add-ons are weaker. However, ever since the Medusa Hair nerf, I would have said before that wasn't the case, but yeah, since Medusa Hair got nerfed, he's definitely not like above Spirit anymore. Um, Definitely a killer. I think that's overplaced. A lot of the time, I would say he's definitely to par with Wraith. I think they're very, very similar. He's still going to be A tier because he has such a big kit, but kind of like what Wesker used to have, or not Wesker, sorry, Vecna. What Vecna used to have was super long cooldowns. Vecna doesn't really have that anymore, while Dracula does. So I would say, unfortunately, Dracula, even though he has a lot in his kit, if you dodge every single one and you just play everything right, it can take a minute for a down. So unfortunately, I think Dracula, I think has to be somewhere in the A minus, bottom of A minus, because he could arguably be B plus, but he has a very solid kit, especially for the base kit. So even though his add-ons don't really excel him, his base kit's really good. So Springtrap, I think, is very similar to Wraith and Dracula, but kind of like a combination of both. You have a very strong anti-loop, very good stealth, pretty good add-ons, and his map mobility is really, really good. Springtrap, I think, is definitely a killer that's going to get on a rise. However, he has one problem. One massive problem is that when you miss your axe, right, or you try to go for axe shots, missing makes you lose distance. And he is 4.4 when he has his axe, and being 4.4 can be painful. Same problem with Huntress, right? Is if you don't throw away your axe, the 4.4 speed can hurt you. So even though you have an anti-loop, slowing down can hurt him. So I would say he's very solid. I think you could arguably put him higher, but I think that as of now, I think that's definitely the spot to put him. Then we have Houndmaster. Houndmaster has a very similar case with the Artist, but unlike Artist, she has good add-ons. And really the only thing holding back Houndmaster is bugs, unfortunately. The dog is very unreliable, and it takes some time to realize how the dog works, but the dog, you have to like wait to come to you to use it. So that really just hurts Houndmaster, unfortunately. But otherwise, she is pretty much in every way, shape, or form the better artist and the better clown. She is very fast when using the dog trail, and using that in anti-loop is so slept on. And the dog holding you in place pretty much is like a Cenobite chain, but unlike Cenobite's chain, you just can't get away from it. So she is a demon. She's actually super strong. And then we have Spirit. Spirit is 4.4. She has some decent mobility, and she has a very good anti-loop. However, a lot of her add-ons are required, but obviously we're looking at this case as you pretty much have every add-on. Flutes kind of being necessary. Yeah, that's true. And of course, you kind of have to run specific add-ons to really excel. But I would say that Spirit has arguably the most simple but effective playstyle in the game, where you're just pretty much just a super fast M1. And even though that might sound bad, it's kind of like the better Wraith, right? You look at it and she's like the stronger Wraith. So to me, I feel like she isn't quite as high as maybe people think she is, but I think she's very good still. And I think her being 4.4 is really the only thing hurting her from being definitely like top 5. So she's very good. And then we have, this is definitely the first hot take. The first two hot takes are definitely coming up here. Knight. Knight is a killer who is definitely slept on because people are playing him wrong. People don't really understand the way to play Knight, and people don't know how to necessarily. Good people know how to go against him, which is why he gets countered because people aren't doing it right. You don't play Knight for the anti-loop, you play him for the slowdown. Sending a guard, leaving that guard to potentially get that person off gens, and committing to another person is so strong, especially with Jailer. Running chase time and call to arms and torch is just so good. His add-ons are insane. Um, he has Carnifex, so he can just counter pre-dropping entirely. He has a form of mobility with his guards, because people don't use the cancel as much as they should be. Um, but Assassin is one of the stronger anti-loop tools in the game. The only thing that really stops Knight from being A plus is maps with windows like Swamp. That really cooks him. But as soon as you go to like somewhere with the game where they have to waste pallets to lose the guard, is so fucking strong. Like people are sleeping on how good Knight actually is. Because most of the time people expect him to just be a killer with AI, so he's unreliable, and then he's just an M1. But you could just say the same thing about Spirit. Spirit's just an M1, right? So to me, Knight is arguably one of the strongest killers in the game. And it is a bit of a hot take, I get that, but trust me, like Knight has definitely the best map presence in the entire game. His map presence is insane. It's kind of like raised to a whole new degree. And then we have Vecna, who recently got buffed, our first in a bottom plus. I would have said he was below Knight before, but as of the buff, people are sleeping on this guy. He's so strong. He can fly over pallets, countering them entirely to pre-dropping. You can lift pallets with Mage Hand, counter the pre-drop. You can hold God pallets up so they can't pre-drop it. He has Skeletons, which is like a frame-perfect injury with no reaction time if they vault, kind of like a Hunter's Hatchet. And then you have Fly, which got mega buffed. Like, if people think Dracula is still stronger than Vecna after this change, I don't know what to tell you. His Fly is so much better than Bats. So Vecna, to me, is so strong now. And he's not add-on dependent at all. His base kit, I would say, is arguably the best in the entire game. Like, I think you could take no add-ons, and he could be, like, one of the strongest in the game. But yeah, Vecna is definitely a slept-on killer, for sure. And then we have Billy. Billy, I've seen some people say he's S tier. I've seen some people say he's, like, A minus. I would say Billy is very good, but he's very map dependent. He's kind of like Huntress to that extent. His pallet break ability is super strong. His ability to curve around loops is very strong. I'm a Billy main, so this is coming from the heart. But maps, just like certain maps, just are bad for him, unfortunately. It's kind of like Bubba to that degree. You don't need Bamboozle as much as you need it on like somebody like Bubba, for example. And his map mobility is arguably one of the best in the game, other than Kaneki. But Billy is just very strong still because of his add-ons. His add-ons are very good. Definitely a killer. I think they could make 4.4 and still be very strong. So even though I don't think he's S tier, I don't think he's like an S tier killer per se. He's still very good. And he's still going to be a snowball god, right? So Billy, I think, has to be above Vecna for that reason. Even though Vecna is super strong now, I don't think he beats Billy quite yet. And then we have Twins. People sleep on Twins, of course. If you know, you know. Twins is insane. Twins has basically no counterplay in every loop. She has arguably the strongest anti-loop in the entire game, with Victor. And her ability to get across the map with Victor is super quick, kind of like to the degree of a Wraith. And the only counterplay you have against Twins is healing, otherwise the whole team goes down. So, to me, I feel like Twins is definitely a top 5 healer. However, she suffers from one thing that keeps her from being like S tier, right? Because she just has so much that's insane, is her inability to use perks in Victor's state, which you don't really need, to be honest, but you can't really use anything related to that. But they recently buffed Twins to make it so Victor activates Chase, which is good because now you can block windows with Victor, which he was already really strong, but now he's even better. So, I guess fuck you guys. Anybody who thought Twins was bad, congratulations, because now you're gonna get stomped by Twins. Twins has very good add-ons, very good base kit. I don't think there's too much I have to say about Twins. She's just insane. And then we have Singularity. I think you could arguably say this guy's S tier against solo queue, if we're looking at solely from solo queue, but as soon as you go against a Swift with AMPs, definitely can hurt you a little bit. It's so noticeable when you go against a solo queue versus a Swift. Like the difference is insane. I would say like if we're just looking at solo queue, he's better than Nurse, but if we're looking at both, right, he is unfortunately countered slightly by Swift, even though he's still insane. So I think he's above Twins and Billy for that reason, just because he's insane. But he's not per se S tier. I've seen some people say he's S tier. I do disagree with that, just because Swift can hurt him for sure. And then we have Kaneki. Kaneki could arguably be pushed up to S tier. You could have him here instead, which is fine. I just don't think he is quite to par with Blight, right? It's not that I don't think he's the third best. It's that I just don't think he's as strong as Blight. So if the order doesn't change, right? He's still the third best, but he's not quite as strong anymore because I would have said beforehand, like on launch Kaneki, in some cases on some maps, better than Nurse, to be honest. And I think you could have arguably said he was better than Blight prior. But I think as of the nerf, I think he's not too bad. He's still top three, right? So he's still insane. His add-ons are still incredibly good. His map mobility is arguably, I would say, better than Blight's. However, he can't M2 down, right? You still have to cut people off. You still have to rely on them holding W to down them. And if they stay in a small loop, you actually have to play them, right? Unlike Blight. So it's not that like Blight's mobility is worse per se, right, than Blight's. It's just Blight gets downs faster. Because now when you break a pallet, you lose tokens, and with Blight you could just catch up anyway. So unfortunately, if Blight lost tokens when he broke pallets, I think Kaneki would be better. But I think just because that's not the case, Blight's better. So unfortunately, Kaneki I think is number 3 instead of number 2. And then we have Blight. I don't think I need any explanation for Blight. Super strong mobility, super strong anti-loop, 4.6, not 4.4. Very busted add-ons even after they add on nerfs, and he basically proceeds well on every single map in the entire game. There's only a few that hurt him off, but the only reason he is worse than Nurse is because Nurse is Nurse, right? So unfortunately, Blight is number 2, which I don't think is a shock to anybody. And then number 1 is Nurse, because walls, pallets, windows, maps, they don't matter, right? If you have a good Nurse who just knows where somebody is, they're just dead. So, yeah, that's the tier list, guys. Uh, as of today, I already know this is going to be a tier list that I already know. I could hear the people crying, why is Hag bottom of tier? Why is Vecna Knight so high? Because this is my personal taste on a tier list. Yeah, it's not going to be everybody's taste, but from my experience, this is just how my brain is braining, right? This is just how I see it. If people can convince me otherwise, I'll listen to them. But as of now, this is how I see the list, and I've listened to it, I would say a decent amount of people and where they should go. And I've been very open-minded, which is why I've changed my opinion on Hag and Huntress. Uh, because I think they only excel at mistakes. Somebody told me that, and that changed my mind on where I used to put Huntress high A tier and Hag B tier. And now they're just completely different, and now my mindset's just changed. So, uh, yeah, unfortunately, maybe it's not a tier list that everybody will like, but it's my tier list, right? So, who cares? Who gives a fuck? Hopefully, you guys like the tier list. I know I haven't posted on my YouTube in a minute. But yeah, hopefully you guys like it. It's been a minute since I posted my last tier list, so this is up to date with Springtrap. Happy 9-year anniversary, guys.